In the 1200s, a very powerful maritime state was established here on the island of Java, replacing the old Kediri kingdom to become a contender for regional hegemon in Southeast Asia. Now, under its zenith, under its very aggressive and most ambitious king, Kertanegara, who also was its last king, Singhasari, which was the name of this empire, Singhasari controlled the trade routes and territory all the way from, the Malay Peninsula in the west to Bali in the east. And this was a serious trade empire. Meanwhile, Kertanegara consolidated power at home, defeating his rivals, quelling rebellions, and otherwise flexing his political and military muscles. But in forging this empire, Kertanegara made powerful enemies, both at home and abroad. See, when you're a maritime empire, trade routes are what matter most. And there are several maritime empires, or at least maritime states, in the region whose ruling classes exploit the trade routes, exploit the merchants, and become very, very rich in doing so. And here comes Singhasari taking over one after another of these trade routes. Well, some of these guys traveled to China to make obeisance to pay tribute to the most powerful ruler on earth at the time, that is Kublai Khan, Kublai the Great Khan of China, grandson of Genghis Khan. And while they're there, they tell him about Singhasari and all the trouble it's causing. Of course, Kublai Khan, he knows about Singhasari. He knows it's growing. He knows it's rich and prosperous. And listening to these emissaries, he may have thought to himself, it's time Singhasari submitted to the Mongol Empire. And more importantly, it's time Singhasari paid tribute too. And so, envoys were sent multiple times. But not only were they refused, but at least one of them had his face mutilated by tattoo, by hot iron, and had his ears cut too, possibly by Kertanegara himself, before being packed off back to China. Now, Kertanegara must have known that retribution would be coming. The Mongol tradition of reprisal, of revenge for mistreating its, envoys had been long established since the days of Kublai's grandfather. So he must have known that death and destruction, or at least the threat of death and destruction, was coming. Now, this gives you an idea of how powerful he must have felt, Singhasari was. Well, as expected, when Kublai saw the state of his envoy, he was enraged. This Javan king, this upstart, must be taught a lesson. He must be punished. And so 1,000 war junks were organized and filled with elite Mongol troops and sent into these far southern seas. Now, building an empire is always risky. One of the great risks of building empire is the risk of overextension. Kertanegara was so ambitious about expanding abroad that he momentarily lost sight of what was happening at home. And that gave a chance for one of his rivals, a guy named Jayakatwang, to overrun his capital and take it over, take control. And in the fighting, Kertanegara died. And, Jayakatwang declared himself the king of the restored Kediri kingdom. And that was that. So when the Mongols arrived in 1292 with their 1,000 ships, they were informed that the guy they'd come to punish wasn't even alive anymore. And then something sort of bizarre happened. At least on the surface, it looks bizarre. See, the Mongols hadn't traveled all this way just to turn around and go home because one guy died. Someone was getting punished. That's what Mongols do when you mess with their emissaries. Well, anyway, it just so happened that Kertanegara had a son-in-law, Radan Vijaya. But the Mongols didn't turn their wrath on him. Instead, Radan Vijaya, who had his own troops and his own plans, he was able to convince them somehow to join him and together to go and take out this now restored Kediri kingdom, to take out Jayakatwang. And they did it. In a sort of a bizarre historical twist, it was the Mongols who went on to restore Singhasari with, Kertanegara's own son-in-law. You might wonder, why would they do this? I think maybe they wanted to do it because they assumed that if they did so, this new Singhasari state would then owe them and maybe be a loyal tribute-paying state. Who knows? It went wrong, though. They were able to take out Jayakatwang. They were able to destroy Kediri. But then Radan Vijaya turned his troops on the Mongols, on those who just helped him. And they massacred them. Many Mongols died in the fighting. Others died from tropical disease. The rest were able to flee to their ships and sail off. And, they were never seen again. This would be Kublai Khan's last great expedition that he would ever send out. And it happens to be one of the very few instances in history, at least the history of the original Mongol Empire, where the Mongols were actually defeated in out-and-out battle. Still, the Mongol penchant for changing history, even when they failed, holds true here in Java as well. So in the case of Java, the Mongols helped sweep aside Jayakatwang's bid for a revived Kadiri kingdom, and instead they set the stage, they paved the way for the establishment of a new maritime empire, that of Majapahit. And guess who Majapahit's first ruler was? Raden Vijaya, the same guy who had used the Mongols, outwitted them, and then defeated them. And Majapahit would go on to become much greater than even Singhasari had been, controlling trade routes and territory from southern Thailand and Sumatra all the way to the southern Philippines and New Guinea. It was the last great maritime empire of the pre-modern age in this region, before the coming of the Europeans and modernity. And it likely never would have existed if not for the Mongol intervention.